I am Tarquinio. I am 42 years old. I am from Sao Paulo, and I've had many problems with drugs.
Well, I slipped into drugs when I was about 17, shortly after my parents had separated and my brother had died. All this was just too much for me.
I started taking drugs when I was about 13 years old. You know, I was unhappy at home with my family and did not get along very well with my mother and my stepfather. Due to these disappointments in life, I took up drugs, in particular cocaine. He himself had already written 2 times to this place, but when the day came, he did not want to come. But thank God the second time he agreed. It is a blessing of God I received today.
The Fazenda does not try to please you. The Fazenda invites you to take a new step, to follow the paths of God. And it goes against the flow. I'm sure, and I see clearly, that the world often sees us and thinks, how silly it seems to live that way. It's not possible. But we say, we take this step because God, one day, when He entered this world through His Son, gave us this path and left us His Word. I say to you that as long as I live, I will always, always follow the Word of God, even if the whole world speaks differently, because I believe that His Word is eternal.
Porque acredito que sua palavra é eterna. A vida, a humanidade canta a vida que terá, luz que sempre viveu em ti, a luz que não morrerá, o céu coloriu a tua história.
I've been living in Brazil now for 27 years. So we started with a group where we tried to live the Word. And the youngsters would come and see me and would tell me about their problems. So I gave shelter to many of them up in the parish house. And there were even children and pregnant girls coming to us.
It was our wish to constitute a community of life, where the experiences of the first Christians could be lived. What influenced us very much was the discovery that the Word could be lived. Returning home after work, I would pass a street corner where a lot of young drug addicts would meet. At that time, our parish had started to choose a phrase of the Gospel to be put into practice. We had chosen the phrase from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, "For the weak I made myself weak. I made myself all things to all men." So when I passed by this group on the corner, I would observe them as everyone used to do, and would pass them at a distance as everyone used to do, you know. But this phrase was in my heart, and it spoke to me that I really should approach them, overcoming my fear of how I would be received by them. So at point blank, I then asked one of them if he could teach me how to make one of those handmade bracelets. He spontaneously told me his whole life story, the traumatic experience of his loneliness, and after the 2 hours we'd spent together, and as I was leaving his place, he came up to me and said, "I wanted to tell you something. I feel that for the first time in my life I have found a real friend." And his joy caught the others of the group, so that at first one came, then another, soon another, and another again, and at last the whole group would meet up in church. They would start to meet each day at Mass and in the parish with Father Hans.
Cannabis is something that gives you an appetite, that makes you sleep well. Sexuality becomes more intense. It gives you everything you want, everything I wanted at that moment. So I started to sink more and more. I remember how my real friends started to keep them away from me. I got to the point of living only because of drugs. One day my mother, on the way to the market, passed by me in the street and saw me. She then asked me whether I did not want to change my life. Deep inside of me, I had this small light that said, "You have to get out from this kind of life."
I had always had this feeling that I used drugs to be able to feel things. Because when I was not using drugs, I did not feel anything anymore. I only felt hate, anger, and bitterness. And when I used drugs, I had the feeling all of that passed. I remember my father being very desperate about my situation. He pleaded for help to a saint I now see as my intercessor, namely little Teresa of the Child Jesus, because she helps me very much. She is always by my side, carrying me in her arms. I remember that my father, who told me this afterwards, said that when the relics of little Teresa arrived in our town, he went to the church to be near her relics, and that he knelt down and stayed there the whole night long, kneeling and praying. I remember him saying afterwards that people standing nearby were commenting on his behavior, saying things like, "What is this man doing here?" All night long, kneeling there and praying, pleading, you know, holding the letter I had written in his hand. This letter I had written after arriving home in a very depressed mood. I was very drugged, and I wrote this letter to the Fazenda Esperança, and there was my father praying to Saint Teresa, and the next day I was already up here at the Fazenda with the blessing of God.
Well, I got into drugs at the age of 17, and so about 2 years ago I lost everything because of alcohol and cocaine. I lost my house, I lost my children. So I found myself completely lost, without anything, adrift. I came here to the Fazenda Esperança without a life at all. I didn't have any wish at all to continue living. It was through my friend Tatiana, as my family no longer believed in me. It was through her mother, who told me about her experience at the Fazenda and who brought me here. So I came.
Que me contou a experiência dela aqui na fazenda.